Russia has launched a major summer offensive, attacking along several front lines, from Sumy in the north of Donetsk and even the edge of Dnipropetrovsk. But despite heavy fighting and record numbers of assaults, there are signs the offensive is already stalling. In some areas like Sumy, Ukrainian forces have pushed the Russians back. Russia now claims to have entered Dnipropetrovsk region, while Ukraine says fighting is still ongoing and the defense is holding. So is this offensive failing or just beginning? To help us understand what's really happening on the ground, we're joined by Austrian military expert Tom Cooper. Tom, it's a pleasure to have you here in our studio, and I'm always eager to speak with you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Nice to be with you.
So, Tom, Russian sources are now claiming, and probably you know it's from the yesterday, that their troops have crossed into the Dnipropetrovsk region. And Institute of Study of War wasn't confirmed the broader claims. Ukraine says heavy fighting is ongoing. They said about the gray zone. So how seriously should we take this Russian assertion?
Well, we have to take it seriously because they are definitely inside the Dnipropetrovsk oblast. Even if it is just 2 or 20 meters, but they are still moving into the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, which in turn is showing that Putin is not only aiming to capture all of these oblasts of Ukraine, which he has originally claimed, but wants more. This is de facto confirming assumptions or assessments that Russians are, meanwhile, into something like Plan P, which is capture all of Ukraine east of Dnipro River.
Yeah. You know, but the Telegraph reports that Russia's summer offensive is already, faltering despite a record number of attacks. And so why such a massive operation failed? Is it failed, actually, from your perspective? And if it's failed to produce meaningful breakthroughs on the battlefield?
I do not see it as failed. Or let me take a few steps back and start from the start. This offensive is going on for at least a month, if not longer, already. And Russians are pushing like crazy all over the front, all along the front line. There are minor, let's say, diversions in the Sumy Oblast, in the Vuhledar, not in the Vuhledar Oblast, but in Kyiv Oblast, in the north of the Kyiv Oblast. These are distracting Ukrainian armed forces, and forcing them to keep their brigades and battalions in those areas, not to move them down to the south, where the main attack is coming. And the Russians are successful in this, in preventing the ZSU from redeploying its units towards the south. But they are not particularly successful in regards of coming forward. It is a usual rate of advance of 200 to 1,000 meters a day, perhaps, if it is as much. That is what is going on. Where there is a problem is that this is always the same problem, that the Ukrainian political and military leadership are refusing to reform the ZSU, are stalling even this reorganization and establishment of core commands, continuing to create chaos on different sectors of the front line, and so on. So this is the principal problem why the Russians are still advancing. A reorganized, retrained ZSU would have made a short story with all of this Russian offensive, but this is not happening because CSK in particular, and that with support from Zelensky in Yermak, are refusing to reorganize and to retrain the armed forces. So this is the principal problem. Otherwise, Russians wouldn't be making any kind of advances at all.
Yeah, Tom, you are actually, yes, you're always talking about that problem that we have.
No.
Okay, what would you do? You said that we have to train soldiers more. What would you do, if we're going to change something in our approach in Ukrainian armed forces? We would really, push Russians back?
We are now in 1st of July. So this means that at least 6, if not 7 months have passed since the announcements of the organization of core commands. In some sectors this reorganization, this establishment of core commands has worked. In other, it didn't work. And it didn't work because Zelensky continues micromanaging the situation. That means he continues disabling or disestablishing de facto brigades and sending their battalions to ever new crisis spots around the front line. He continues to micromanage the distribution of reinforcements in troops, of supplies, of ammunition, of everything, in order to de facto sabotage Drapati's efforts to stabilize the front line. This is the essence of the Ukrainian war effort right now, and Zelensky is doing everything in his powers to sabotage this essence. This is the problem. This is why I'm talking all the time about this. Just the newest example, he has established additional anti-aircraft machine gun battalions, crazy, in order to improve the air defenses from Russian attack UAVs. Actually, what has happened was that not only Zelensky, but Zelensky and Yermak too have received quite a bribe for a purchase of Browning M2 machine guns, and they've exploited this to establish these new machine gun battalions, while there are units on the front line which need both the machine guns and the troops, and these machine guns are very limited effectiveness against high-flying and then diving attack UAVs. So, and then he explains this with, well, I've been misinformed by subordinates who are lying. Well, he has established the atmosphere. Zelensky has established the atmosphere in which his subordinates are lying, and he is encouraging such behavior. And if his subordinates are lying to him, then he is also lying to the public. But no, he's using the explanation that his subordinates are lying to him, but he's not lying to the public. I mean, this is so debilitating the entire Ukrainian war effort. I cannot explain it enough, and therefore one cannot expect the forces on the front line to behave any better. Then we have this affair with Vuhledar Group. There shouldn't be a Vuhledar Group. There should be a core command in that area, but there is no core command because here he has prevented the establishment of the core command in the Vuhledar area, which means that, and then he has promoted officers who are lying to him. Why? Because he needs a win. Mm-hmm. And he needs a win because his president knows him as General of Fantastic News. So that means president expects good news. Zelensky is delivering this good news. Therefore, he's punishing any kind of commanders who are reporting what is really going on the front line, forcing them to lie, and then complains when they are lying to him and to the public as well, therefore.
But that's very delusional.
This cannot work. This cannot function. And I've written already back in September, October last year, he must go. And until he goes, there will be no improvement on the battlefield efficiency of the Ukrainian armed forces. This is the principal problem. And no, instead of that, all the reforms, all the retraining, and so on are held back or even completely sabotaged. So when you ask me what would I do, I would have introduced this core command, and I would have improved the training, broader training in all the 30-something training centers around Ukraine to the same standard, which means I have, in such a case, if I would be a top commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Glavcom, I would have to tour all the 30 centers. My advisors and my aides would have to write down everything that I have found is not okay. And they would have to take care. I would then issue the order for them to take care for the troops to be trained to the same standard at every training center. Instead, you have troops trained to 30 different standards in Ukraine. So it always depends on what brigade is drawing from what training center. That means in some centers, the troops receive, they are spending 1 or 2 months over there. They are receiving no training at all. At most, they are receiving training in watching as their superiors are stealing even the food. In other some handful of centers, they are receiving perfect training as infantrymen. This is the problem. And the commanders at the front line never know when are they going to get reinforcements or replacement troops. nor in what quality are this going to be trained. Because what happens then as next, these troops, which are trained in very different standards, are distributed along CSK preferences. This commander he's my favorite, he's going to get more troops. This commander, he is not particularly a fan of mine, and nor am I fan of him. Therefore, he's going to get no reinforcements. Just like last year in Vuhledar, where he has left the 72nd Mechanized Brigade to be decimated, de facto destroyed, and what was left, was perhaps a battalion worth that came out of Vuhledar. And that's for months, although it was clear that the Russians are preparing attack and surrounding the brigade. No, he didn't send any reinforcements, he didn't send any kind of significant amounts of ammunition and supplies. He has simply left the brigade in the place until it was de facto, actually not de facto, but actually surrounded and had to extract itself out of the trouble. And what has happened then, he has patched up the front line with 6-7 different battalions. And what a surprise, this didn't work. Why? Because CSK didn't even care to organize command and control between them, to say, okay, you are the commander of this sector, you command these 6 battalions. No, 6 battalions, 6 different commanders, no command and control, no coordination between them. And this is how it works. That was in Vuhledar that way, and ever since it's in Sumy that way, and so on. So the only difference was that in Sumy, the commanders themselves came together and said, okay, let's organize, otherwise we are going to get overrun by the Russians. And this is how they stopped the Russian offensive in Sumy area.
But why Ukrainian authorities don't see that this approach doesn't work? Because if you see what's happening in Sumy, I mean, you know it, I know it. Why?
No, Natalie, excuse me, but that is not bringing enough income and profit. And I've mentioned this example with machine guns and bribery. Regarding machine guns, this is far more important and interesting. You have to understand this, because this is bringing cash into their pockets, even into Zelensky's and Yermak's pockets. So this is important. And whether now Ukraine is winning or not, it's holding out, so that's fine. And the rest is going to be solved by Western allies, sometimes in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years or wherever. Never mind. I mean, it is just like this process of constructing ammunition factories and arms factories. So they are now going to, with German founding, and German companies are going to build this armament factory and that ammunition factory and that UAV factory and whatever else. And who is going to take care about energy supply for these factories? I mean, after all, the entire machinery of such factories cannot work without electricity. But if the Russians have no problem to reach and to destroy power plants in Ukraine, then what electricity do we want to supply to such factories? And if the Russians want to go a step further, they can target such factories with their attack UAVs and missiles. And who is then going to defend them? This is something I've asked already the last year and the year before. There's no answer. The number of air defense systems, and particularly ammunition for them, delivered to Ukraine is continuously decreasing. The situation was critical in February this year. We are meanwhile in July. Nothing has happened. Oh, it's okay.
But what about they will locate these manufacturers in Carpathian Mountains, for instance, or other option in Poland to combine manufacturing from Ukrainian and Polish side, or what I've heard from Germany, they will do or are doing already the same.
Yes, they are going, and principally there is this. Idea is this. If we position a factory in Ukraine and manufacture by Ukrainians, then the price of labor, the price of hands, Ukrainian hands, it's much lower. So this is higher profit for us. In this case, Germans or Danish or British or whoever. So therefore, this idea with positioning some of the factories in Poland is not a good one, because this is much more expensive. Polish people are more expensive meanwhile. So this is not a good idea, because there is less profit for the investors. Correspondingly, we have to position the factories inside Ukraine, because the profit is so important. It's not about winning the war, it's about the profit.
But
I can only laugh about this. You know, this
Yeah, I
is
know.
this is the constantly the same situation since what was that summer 2022. So we are talking about the same things and turning in circles for 3 years. It's always the same with modeling the outcome, with profiting, but not with actually fighting and winning the war, which is what matters because it's a war and not an opportunity to extract profits. But no, for the decision makers in the West in particular, important is the profit. And if if the profit is not sufficient, then sorry, we have to construct this factory in Ukraine because Ukrainian labor is cheaper. Fine. And that's how they think and that's how they do.
But I thought contemporary factories, considering the war in Ukraine, they have this, backup plan in case of emergency, in case of ruining their electricity supplies.
Backup plan. Ukraine has no plan at all, excuse me. In Zelensky, Yermak, and so on, they do not have any kind of a plan. And why? First problem is the Western, the way the West supplies its aid. Yermak, I'm talking about Yermak because he's more important than Zelensky. He's the actual decision maker in Kyiv, not Zelensky. Zelensky is something like his loudspeaker. So Yermak is talking through Zelensky. Yermak cannot plan for more than 2 or 3 weeks, perhaps 2 months. Why? Because the value of the aid sent by the West is never more than two weeks to 2 months. So he cannot plan a strategic level. He cannot plan 6 months in advance, 12 months in advance. No, this is the first problem. Second problem is, even if he's more concerned with pocketing than with actually planning for the war and developing some kind of a strategy to defeat Russia and force the Russians out of Ukraine. This is also mirrored in the situation, in the fact that he's still not announcing a mobilization. Because Ukraine needs to mobilize. Excuse me, you are facing a war of extermination, and you are still not mobilizing, which in turn means for the West, well, if Ukrainians are not concerned enough to mobilize and to really move all of their manpower, recruit all of their troops they could, why should we in the West care? And then you have the next problem. This is the Western. This is, I said, I think already in the last interview, it is in fashion to say, Putin unterport us in the West, which means Putin is going to invade NATO in 2, perhaps in 3, well, perhaps in 5, perhaps at latest in 10 years, he's going to invade us. Well, this is typical for the last 30, 40 years, Western idiocy. You are thinking about some kind of scenarios, fantastic ideas and so on, and then everybody's talking just about this idea, nothing else. And there is no other possible outcome of the situation in question. We have seen this in Syria, we have seen this in Yemen, we have seen this in Mali, we have seen this now, we are watching this in Ukraine for 3 years. And everybody is talking just about Putin is going to attack NATO. Nobody is coming to the idea to prevent this through bolstering Ukrainian defense capabilities. No, instead we have to bolster our own defense capabilities, which in turn means, sorry, Ukraine, we can't send you any heavy equipment anymore because we have no Leopard 2s left. We have to keep them for ourselves, to defend ourselves from that Putin's invasion in 2, 3, 5, 10 years. We have to build up our stocks of ammunition. So therefore, sorry, Ukraine, we cannot send you any kind of ammunition, and so on and so on. There are very few Western European or Central European leaders, and the post office always, who are thinking in different fashion. For example, Czech president, he is thinking in different fashion. Denmark is thinking a little bit in different fashion. Sweden is thinking a little bit in different fashion. But otherwise, everybody else is just babbling and thinking this way. Correspondingly, you can't, excuse me, if you're doing wrong things and wrong things and wrong things, the end result cannot be different but wrong.
Yeah, Tom, but
because one is 2.
What about the NATO communique that when the European countries agreed to spend 5% to the defense? Seriously, at least it's something, no?
Okay, when I agree 5%. Actually, it is so. they agree 5% and are talking about 5%, but actually are spending something like 3.5%, depending on the country. And some not even that. Some are spending just 2%. And then they fill this remaining up to 5% with investment in infrastructure, into bridges, railways, roads, whatever, ports. And then declare, this is also defense spending, because we are building a bridge from Italy to Sicily. This is all, not even Maskirovka, because Maskirovka would be something secret and something with the purpose of serious military purpose, but there is nothing of that. This is just babbling and in order to appear, look, we are doing something. We have reached 5%. We are going to spend. And besides, the question is by when? They are going to reach 5% by 2030. Not now, but in 5 years. Therefore, all of this is, typical quality management failure of the West. We cannot manufacture anymore. We cannot check the quality of what we are letting somebody else manufacture. If there is a broken TV coming in from Pakistan or India or in Vietnam or China, and the customer is complaining about this, we send that TV, we pack it on the truck, send it to France or Poland for checks. And then from there to Romania, because it's cheaper to repair there, to Romania for repairs, and then we send it back to the customer. This is the way the West is manufacturing nowadays, and this is profitable. So therefore, how shall our politicians act and manage, organize, finance, run the entire show in some different fashion than the major corporations are doing it? Most of them are coming from major corporations, after all, and are paid by major corporations in order to administer in their interest. How can one expect any kind of different results if there is only one way they know and the only one way they do?
I always expected that our next conversation will be easier. We're going to speak about more positive stuff happening in Ukraine on the front line. You're going to say me Russian losing everywhere, and Europeans are helping.
I can tell you, for example, the gentlemen who are in charge of Sumy sector of the front line, they have lieutenant colonels, they were left on their own. Zelensky has pulled out all the best units of the ZSU out of this area, and they were left on their own, and nobody cared about them for weeks. So what did they do? They came together. They established their own command center, came together, sat down, and said, "Okay, guys, we on our own. We have 2 weak brigades. One is poorly trained. Zelensky wouldn't let us have more than 100 FPVs per brigade. If we receive any kind of reinforcements, then some disparate battalions, independent battalions from different brigades, whatever, and most of them from territorial defense, which is poorly trained, poorly equipped. I mean, guys, we are not going to survive this one without organizing ourselves on our own." And this is what they did. And this is how they stopped the Russian advance on Sumy. And you have this pattern. I have reported about this already. Was it September, October, at latest November last year, in several other sectors, which means that local commanders are coming together and acting on their own. I call this autonomous sectors. We've seen this in Kupiansk, we've seen this in several other sectors. I don't want to point with fingers at any commanders, because the gentlemen in question are doing the only same thing, which is organizing themselves at the local level. Because Zelensky, I can write you a checklist about how is Zelensky commanding. And the start of that checklist would be, he's ignoring the problem until it's too late. Always, every time. And there is a standing joke that he's constantly mixing red arrows with blue arrows on his maps, because he thinks that red arrows are Ukrainian. Excuse me for expression. So he thinks, ours are advancing, that is great. I mean, I'm laughing about this because there is nothing left but humor to comment about this. And the guys at the front lines are laughing as well. What should they do? This Absolutely. Is their top commander.
Dark humor is a way to survive such circumstances.
Ah, gosh, it is. I mean, I would like to tell you, good news. I would like to tell, look, and there are sectors where one can talk about local successes, but overall, as long as Zelensky remains in command, it is just, a tragedy, because he is now coming to the idea. For example, another example coming to my mind. Oh, we are running counterattacks. We are running counterattacks. ZSU is running counterattacks. Yes, of course, the ZSU is running counterattacks all the time, because he is all the time issuing nonsensical orders for commanders of brigades or battalions to launch counterattacks to recover position, because a lost position is bad news. He's not letting them free hand to act the way they can or they find suitable. No. If he orders battalion, whatever battalion has to counterattack and recover the lost position, then they have to attack, otherwise the commander is dismissed. I mean, this is the way he commands. And if then the battalion commander reports, even if he is lying, oh, I ran a counterattack, the position is recovered, even if it is not, what a surprise. Or if the commander in question says, yes, I ran a counterattack, 10 people have been killed, it was unsuccessful, which might be also a lie, because he didn't do at all, because he's not crazy to go losing troops for pointless counterattack. What a surprise. So Zelensky is establishing a system in which the commanders have to lie, whether to him or to other superiors. He's establishing a system in which the people between him, nominally meant to command specific sectors, so the people between him and local commanders are absolutely useless. They are just figures who are sitting there watching at the monitors, and that's it. This is his command system. This is what he has established. And let us not forget, Zelensky was commander of the ground forces, while Zaluzhny was the top was Glavcom. So this is going on not since yesterday, not since last year, not since 2 years, but for 4 years already, or longer. And now we are surprised that the results are not better. We need not be surprised at the least. Actually, if we want to be surprised, then about the fact that the ZSU is still holding the front line and not falling apart, retreating, really big style, because this is the only surprise in the general situation. And this means that the troops at the front line and their commanders know what are they doing. And no matter how much is Zelensky, I'm not going to use too fierce expressions now, but messing up, no matter how much is he making, no matter how many mistakes is he doing, the troops are still holding out, the commanders are still holding out. So this is a good news, if you like. Yeah. It shows how much the ZSU could actually do if having a proper, decent, clever, and honest commander at the top, which it currently does not have. It has somebody who is after pocketing bribery, positioning his favorites and buddies in crucial positions so they can cash as well, and actually does not care whether Ukraine is winning or losing, but is lost in his daydreaming and has no trace of an idea what is he doing. That is the problem. This is what we have as a situation.
Yes, and I want to get back, before I'm going to go to talk about the air defense in Ukraine, I want to get back to the article I mentioned of the Telegraph. And it mentions that taking Kramatorsk would require over 100,000 additional troops of Russia. And given Russia's current resources and losses, how realistic is that objective this year?
Kramatorsk, personally, I doubt that the Russians are ever going to get there. See how long it takes them just to get below Horivka, next to Lysychansk. The Russians do not need 100,000 extra troops. They just need Zelensky to remain in command. It's simple as that. If he remains in command, well, Kramatorsk is not going to fall this year, but perhaps next year or the year after, because sooner or later this is going to happen. Sooner or later this Russian grinding is going to reach Kramatorsk. It is simply in the nature of the things. Even if they are advancing 20 meters a day or 2 meters a day, they're still exercising such a pressure that sooner or later they are going to reach Kramatorsk. This is unavoidable. And with this current style of command, Ukrainian command, it can't happen any other way. It cannot develop any other way. It can only go in this direction. Why? Because this is Zelensky's style of command, and this is the logical result of it. 1 + 1 is always 2 on Mars, on Jupiter, on the next galaxy, or on Earth. It doesn't matter. It's always 2. There's no other outcome from 1 + 1. So if the Russians continue like they are currently doing, they're sooner or later going to reach Kramatorsk. I just say that the local troops, local commanders are doing a good job in causing the Russians to reach Kramatorsk rather later than sooner. But in total, the outcome is unavoidable because the command style of Zelensky is such that Ukraine cannot but lose this war. That is the tragedy of the situation. Remove the guy, position somebody like Drapati over there. There are enough clever generals who have proven themselves. There are enough young generals in Ukraine. They are not no stupids or something. On the contrary, right now they are avoiding being promoted and sent to Kyiv to serve directly under Zelensky because they don't want to work with him. It is that bad. They called Kyiv a snake pit, and they don't want to be there. They prefer, it's more dangerous here to command my brigade. Russians are sooner or later going to find my headquarters, are going to hit it. But I still prefer remaining where I am than to go to Kyiv and to serve directly under Zelensky because it's going to you see what has happened to Drapati. He took over, started reorganizing, reforming, and so on. Bam, Zelensky, no, you are not going to do that. I'm going to sabotage you if necessary, and started sabotaging him actively in order to prevent Drapati from being successful, because this would expose how many mistakes and how wrong is Zelensky. Therefore, Drapati had to be cut off and limited to he's commanding the front line. Where actually Drapati is commanding specific sectors of the front line, not even the entire front line. Again, it is not going to work in any other way. And regarding Kramatorsk, yes, the Russians are going to reach the place. I cannot tell you tomorrow or in 2 weeks or something, but logic says that because of current system of command in Ukraine, they have to reach it sooner or later. Understood. It's just not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, understood. But what, that the Ukrainians have survived, not all of them, unfortunately, quite a horrible night. Yeah. Last week and a previous week, because of the Russian attacks on Ukrainian capital and other cities, Odessa. So my question to you, because this morning I've read the information that Kyiv is becoming the most unprotected and most dangerous city in Ukraine, and the situation has taken a turn, that we're critically lacking of air defense systems. This is the owner of a drone manufacturing company said. What is your take on that?
The degeneration of Ukrainian air defenses can be traced back to 2023, where the West failed to launch production of air defense systems, and especially air defense missiles and development of new systems on time. Ukrainian government failed that as well. Companies in Kyiv, for example, have had production lines ready to launch production of own designs, of own surface-to-air missiles. And Kyiv was more busy, which means Yermak and Zelensky were preoccupied with bringing these companies under their control, complaining about their corruption and incompetence and so on, which is absolute nonsense. But it was more important to bring them under control, and if they make any kind of profit, then cash from this. And therefore, Ukraine didn't launch its own production of surface-to-air missiles. West didn't launch production of surface-to-air missiles. The Americans were the only ones who have developed this new APKWS system, which is essentially air-launched unguided rockets equipped with laser guidance. So this is a very cheap mean to counter these huge numbers, huge waves of attack UAVs coming over Ukraine every night. But what did he do? Well, that was the system. The system was developed 2 years ago, went into production early this year. But what happened? Well, Trump has sent it for the defense of Israel because Israel is more important than Ukraine, and Ukraine is unimportant, at least from his point of view. So all the measures that have been undertaken were too little, too late. And what a surprise! Early this year, already in February, Ukrainian air defense was short on surface-to-air missiles. In other cases, we have had, for example, this Italian and French system, surface-to-air missile system, which was rushed to Ukraine, and it proved excellent in combat. But it arrived with a supply of just enough missiles for about a month. Correspondingly, the system arrived in Ukraine, used these missiles for about a month, and then received no replacements, and then it's standing idle. And the situation is meanwhile so critical. The Ukrainian air defenses are so short on missiles, in particular, as a result of all of this, that now they have to scramble to protect crucial production facilities, especially these new ammunition factories, new armament factories. They cannot defend Kyiv anymore. It's a perfectly logical result. Additionally to it, and regardless who is meanwhile at the top of the PSU, that means Air Force and Air Defense Force, the command style is still the same like before, which means still the same failure like by CSK, what CSK is doing on the ground. Therefore, too many units haven't received up-to-date training. The information distribution is not good enough, and so on and so on. So it's exactly the same set of problems. And as a result of this, the effectiveness of air defenses is constantly decreasing instead of improving and increasing. As a result of this, F-16s and Mirages are deployed in a fashion that is rather resembling something like weakened, watered down Soviet version of thinking, rather than some new, rather than there is development of Ukrainian tactical methods based on experiences. No, this is not going to happen because the top commander does not want this. And so you have ever less flexibility. There are no such operations like 1 or 2 years ago when, for example, 138 Air Defense Brigade was roaming the battlefield and causing losses to the Russians, causing them massive problems, shooting down their AWACS aircraft or shooting down their Su-34s. Nothing of this is undertaken anymore. If any kind of heavier surface-to-air missile systems are deployed closer to the front lines, then in such an incompetent fashion, then they are hit by Russian Iskanders. Then you have always the same story with shot down Ukrainian pilots. It's always, oh, he has got hit and he was such a hero. I mean, I'm not trying to decrease their skills and capability. It's their commanders I'm talking about. Oh, he was such a hero, and last act he did was to steer his aircraft away from the city, town, or village. Where the commanders writing such statements for the press have no trace of an idea what has happened to the pilot in question and the aircraft in question. Why don't they have it? Because they do not even try to check. Every time there is an investigation, or an investigation is announced, and how many results of any kind of investigation service?
But why is that, Tom? I
Zero.
don't. Yeah, okay, but why is that?
It's always the same reason. You can't investigate properly in Ukraine, in the armed forces, because investigating would mean that you have to check what kind of orders have been issued by top commanders. And critique and review of top commanders is forbidden. This is verboten. This is absolute no. You cannot criticize CSK, you cannot criticize the commander of the Air Force, you cannot criticize anybody. It is forbidden. You can't do this. And therefore, we never know what has got one F-16 or what has got some some Patriots battery that was deployed closer to the front line, or some S-300 battery, or whoever else. Just like we never know who has caused the loss of Wuhledar, who has caused such troubles in some other sector. Until today, 3.5 years later, we still don't know who has left the Russians drive into Kherson. Can you imagine this? This is absolutely insane. 3.5 years, and nobody knows what has happened with the southern sector of Ukrainian armed forces on 24th and 25th of February 2022. Mm-hmm. There is an investigation. That is all. And this investigation, well, it's going to be concluded after the war. This is the most I get to hear in this regards. So as long as you're not checking why are you losing the war, you're not learning any kind of lessons, and correspondingly cannot teach your troops, your commanders and troops, how to win the war. It's a logical consequence of this situation. This is happening to the Ukrainian ground forces. This is happening to Ukrainian air defenses. And this is happening to Ukrainian air defenses even more now, when they are so critically short, in some places, out of surface-to-air missiles.
Well, that's clear and said. And, for the end, I would love to ask you the question, because no matter how gonna Russia lie about that they want peace and gonna bring their another, nonsense on the third round of a negotiation in Istanbul, we know they will not stop kill Ukrainians. And, Russia has begun supplying its forces with the new missiles from the Panzer system. And their main task is to shoot down drones and other close-range targets. Is it still a credible shield against drones and long-range missiles, or has its effectiveness been overestimated?
For the start, Russians lying or not lying, they do not need to do anything else but continue this way. I'm telling this again and again. The way this war is developing, thanks to failures of the Ukrainian top political and military leadership, it's developing perfectly for Putin. It's a never-ending war in which he can always recruit people, underprivileged people, poor people from Russia, pay them 10 times as much as they are usually earning to go serving at the front line. And the sad fact is that Ukraine is so much lacking firepower that the mass of them is surviving. Correspondingly, this is encouraging ever additional Russians to go and to volunteer for service in Ukraine. Simply perfect for Putin. It cannot be any better way. So why should he now negotiate with serious intentions of ending this war?
Because of sanctions, because of the U.S. Possible future sanctions, for instance.
Excuse me, sanctions, possible future sanctions. Putin is not thinking that way. Putin is always living in this moment. And in this moment, he's perfectly in control of Russia. He's perfectly on the way of victory, whatever this victory might be in Ukraine. He has developed special relations with China, which is securing his position, even though secretly he considers China as much as enemy as United States and Western Europe. He has indeed isolated Western Europe on the international plane, not only thanks to BRICS, but thanks to Western Europe keenly supporting Israeli genocide on Palestinians, while two-thirds of nations around the world, two-thirds of members of the United Nations are all recognizing Palestine and accusing Israel of genocide on Palestinians. So the situation couldn't be better for Putin. He's safe. His rule is safe. His regime is safe. He has a strong, not ally, but let's say supporter in the form of China in his back. If Americans attack Iran, then he has even more space on the international tribune because he can position himself, now he's going to save Americans and save Israel from bad Iranian boys. He is in excellent relations with Netanyahu, which means that he is blocking any kind of possible Israeli support for Ukraine, but this is actually absolutely unlikely to happen, but he can present himself as somebody who is blocking even this. So everything is fine for Putin. Why should he negotiate? What kind of incentive should he get to negotiate? No, does he have to negotiate? It is simply he's not interested in that. Correspondingly, expecting him to go to Istanbul and then make some concessions, he can only issue ever more demands because the war is developing positively from his point of view. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and then regarding the Panzer system that they are delivering on the front lines.
Panzer system, you mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Air defense system.
That's how we call it in Ukraine. Sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Panzer.
Panzer.
Okay. Panzer is a well-known air defense system, short-range air defense system, a combination of surface-to-air missiles and guns. Has a range of several kilometers. It is present on the front line already since the start of the war. There is no big difference in this regards. The problem is always, from the Russian point of view, how many can they manufacture? Because just like every other high-tech system in operations or developed in Russia over the last 30 years, it's heavily dependent on import of Western high-tech, Western electronics. That means motherboards and chips, which are something that Russia cannot manufacture. Therefore, they have to import this from the West. So this Panzer system, you have seen it being hit by storm shadows, by Ukrainian storm shadows, by UAVs already 2 years ago. This is nothing really new.
Okay, because once it's appeared in the media, I thought it's going to be more complicated for Ukrainian armed forces to get through Russian air space.
Now, if you check the videos from summer 2023, you can see a storm shadow coming in and striking directly into Panzer, which is shooting in the wrong direction. So obviously, Ukraine had effective means to counter Panzers already back then, so it has them now as well. Even more so because all the Russians have then announced the production of Panzer M or S1M or something like that. Again, due to lack of Western-made electronics, they cannot really run such a production. So they're still manufacturing the old variants, S1, S1E, and so on, which are actually for export and similar, which are less capable than M, which is the latest variant. No big deal in total. It's just like S-400, S-400 this, S-400 that. When you talk with Indians, they are swearing the S-400 is the best surface-to-air missile system on this planet. We have to buy more. India has to buy more. Yes, but what happened now, what was it, one week ago? Ukraine hit and demolished an firing unit in Russia. So therefore, it's, even if they would be capable of manufacturing enough such systems to make the difference, the problem is that the training of their operators is getting ever poorer with the time. Because every time Ukraine hits one of these systems, whether S-400, especially fire control elements of such systems, radars of such systems, radar cabins of such systems, it is killing highly experienced personnel, which Russians cannot properly replace. That means every time the quality of replacements is decreasing. So it's not like Russians are improving in this regards. On the contrary, everything else is just PR, nothing else.
See, Tom, we can end up our conversation on a positive, slightly positive note. That's what I think. No?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Tom, thank you so much for your honest, and sharp perspective all the time. And, well, we'll see. I want to see how everything will end up for Ukraine, and we will get through this, and we will survive, and we will see that. I hope soon.
Thank you very much. I mean, look, I'm the way I am. I'm not negative or positive or pessimistic or optimistic. There is a war. Your country is facing a war of extermination. You have to be absolutely realistic and really with both feet on the ground when assessing things happening around you. And you cannot afford having a government and top commanders who are enriching themselves at the cost of the entire society. You can't afford this. Otherwise, you're going to lose the war. This is my principal message. Why? Because this is currently determining the entire flow of the war. This is what is enabling Russian advances. As long as you have this corrupt, incompetent system in power, you cannot win this war. There is no way to do that. Of course, you are scoring, you are developing new UAVs, ground UAVs, surface, sea UAVs. You're bringing new technologies, but this is not thanks to your leadership. This is thanks to de facto people who are working their garages and backyards. And their efforts are much more often hindered by your government and top commanders than the other way around. Because this government and top commanders do not want any kind of reforms, do not want any kind of new systems which they do not understand anyway, even if. So I'm stressing this and emphasizing this so much because this is what is this war meanwhile all about. You need new commanders at the top, perhaps even a new political leadership at the top. Otherwise, you're going to continue losing, and we are going to see this gradual Russian grinding ever longer and longer and reaching ever further into Ukraine, because there's simply no other way for this war to develop, because the skills and capabilities and merits are not improved and not merited enough. So this is what you need. You have to have a new top commander of the armed forces and complete reorganization and retraining and so on and so on. Things I've said already so often. This is not something I have fun with. On the contrary, I would like really describing how the Ukrainian armed forces are advancing in direction of Donetsk and about to liberate it tomorrow in the morning or in 2 weeks or in 2 months, whenever. But right now, it's on the opposite. It's the other way around. If this goes on like that, in 6 to 12 months, Russians are going to be on approach to Dnipro and to Zaporozhye anyway. And what then? Defenses over there are not really ready, because when you have incompetent, corrupt commanders at the top, you cannot prepare proper defenses of Dnipro and Zaporozhye. And not only Dnipro and Zaporozhye, but also Poltava, plus Sumy, and so on and so on. Because if nothing else, sooner or later, Zelensky is going to come to the idea, hey, the guys in Sumy are doing so well, that means they don't need that many forces. Let's take out one of the brigades and send it somewhere else. And if not an entire brigade, then he is going to take 1 battalion from this brigade and 1 battalion from this brigade. And, oh yes, please pack me 1 battalion from this brigade as well and send them somewhere else, because I need them somewhere where it's more urgent. This is how he is commanding all the time, with always the same results. And this is what I'm emphasizing. I'm not having fun with this, even if I'm smiling with it from time to time, because it's ridiculous. But I'm really trying to make this clear to the people who are reading my blog and to your viewers as well. You have to reform the command of the armed forces. You have no other way forward.
Well, I really hope that the Ukrainian authorities will wake up and stop being delusional and will bring Ukraine to the victory. And yes. To the end of the war, definitely. Thank you so much, Tom, and I hope to see you again, and we will talk soon, promise.